Good morning, everyone. My name is Lucie Collino, and I'm a veterinary epidemiologist at ANSES, the French Food Safety Agency. And together with my colleague Sophia Nie from the Public Health Agency of Sweden, Heike Schmidt from RIVM, Netherlands, and Moira Kelly from Sensano, Belgium, it is our great pleasure to present our progress and future plans to progress towards One Health surveillance of AMR in Europe as part of EU-JAMRAI 2. We'll try it. Sorry, but this is not working. Okay. So we are talking on behalf of a group of 25 partner countries, and please bear in mind that we are working primarily at the national level. So our partners are stakeholders and target groups based at national governmental agencies, expert laboratories and ministries, working in close collaboration with EU and UN agencies. Our overall objective is to reinforce the European strategy for One Health surveillance of AMR. More specifically, we aim to strengthen the national surveillance system on AMR in the human health sector, to achieve a full-scale implementation of the European AMR surveillance network in veterinary medicine called EARS-Vet, set up a European AMR surveillance network in the environmental sector, EARS-Env, and develop a national annual One Health surveillance report in each participating member state. We are working on the umbrella of the Council recommendation on stepping up EU action to combat AMR in a One Health approach, which has been presented earlier by Velina. And there are 6 specific recommendations related to surveillance, and these have been translated into national action plans. And earlier this year, a framework was released to monitor the implementation of those recommendations. And we are hoping that our work will not only contribute to the implementation of those recommendations, but also facilitate the evaluation via a specific outcome and output indicators. A lot of progress has been made in the recent years to progress towards One Health surveillance of AMR in the EU. And a very good example of this is the so-called JACRAI report that proposed a joint integrated analysis of antimicrobial consumption and resistance data in humans and animals, looking at statistical association both within sector, which are the vertical arrows, but also between sectors, which are the horizontal arrows. This is a quite advanced level of integration that we are observing here, but there are also limitations in the way this JACRAI is being conducted today. First, the data used in the human sector focus on bloodstream invasive infection from deceased humans, but this is only a subset of all resistant infection that we're observing in humans. In the animal sector, the focus is on carriage of zoonotic and indicator bacteria from healthy animals, but we have no data from deceased animals that we could compare with those used in humans. A third important gap is environmental surveillance. Which is absent from this JACRAI analysis, as you can see. And fourth, this integrated analysis is being performed at European level, but in most countries there are no similar analysis being performed at the national level. Some European countries have a One Health report for surveillance, but often you can see Chapter 1, human surveillance, Chapter 2, animal surveillance, and sometimes Chapter 3, environmental surveillance. But there is no such integrated analysis being done in most countries, so we think national integrated analysis of AMC and AMR is also of importance. So the 4 gaps which are highlighted here in red are those we're trying to cover in our JAMRAI 2 activities, and we'll present this in the coming slides. So this presentation is organized in 2 parts. The first part, sorry, that's if you can move to the previous slide, please. No, the previous one. Thank you. Okay, this presentation is organized in two parts. First, we'll focus on the two networks that we're trying to develop in the animal and environmental sector, so EARS-Vet and EARS-Env. And the second part will be about human health and One Health surveillance. And at the end of each part, we'll have a panel discussion, and we'll also be able to take questions from the audience. So should you have any question on our presentation, please keep them for the panel session. Well, you will we'll have a chance to ask those questions. Okay, so now let's start with the first part about EARS-Vet, a network for surveillance of AMR in diseased animals. As you're probably aware, surveillance of AMR in animals in the EU so far has been focusing on the food chain. There is a harmonized active monitoring coordinated by EFSA that focuses on indicator and zoonotic bacteria from healthy food-producing animals. And we think this monitoring is highly valuable to inform about foodborne AMR transmission and evaluate the exposure of the consumers to AMR. But this surveillance also comes with limitation. The first one is that active surveillance is expensive. So what we can afford today in the EU is approximately 160 isolates per bacteria and animal species every second year in poultry, pig, and cattle. However, we have no data about other animal species, and in particular, no data about companion animals, which are in close contact with humans, as you can see here. Third, while these data are important to evaluate exposure of the consumer, these data are of limited value to guide our veterinarians on how they should treat their animals, since we have little information about the resistance profile of the bacteria that are leading to animal infections. So we think an important gap in the European strategy for surveillance of AMR in animals is surveillance of diseased animals. And this not only matters for animal health, but it also matters for public health. Next slide, please. So a good example of this is the emergence of carbapenem-resistant enterobacteria in food-producing and companion animals. As highlighted by Velina earlier, this is an important public health hazard, which is rising in the EU, and there is growing evidence that it's also rising in both food-producing and companion animals. And we think we need additional data to be able to assess the risk for public health. So recognizing this gap, an initiative was launched in JAMRAI 1 to create a new network for surveillance of AMR in veterinary medicine in the EU. The ambition is to parallel EARS-Net in the human sector and to close a gap on AMR surveillance in clinical isolates from animals. The idea is to complement the existing EFSA monitoring in the food chain, to support antimicrobial stewardship in veterinary medicine, add on the JACRA pool of data, support risk assessment, and advise EU policy makers, and also monitoring of interventions, and ultimately to improve animal health and public health. So as part of JAMRAI 1, several achievements have been made to kickstart this network. First, we reviewed existing national surveillance systems, and as you can see on the map here on the right, in 2021, approximately half of the EU countries had a national surveillance system for AMR in animal pathogens in place. However, these were highly diverse. So looking on what those countries were monitoring, we defined a preliminary scope for this network, including 6 animal species: cattle, chicken, turkey, pigs, dogs, and cats, 11 bacterial species, and resistant profile of interest to both human and animal health. We agreed upon method and standard to be used in this network, and we conducted a pilot study. This pilot study was a proof of concept of what EARS-Vet can achieve. 9 countries and 11 partners participated to this pilot study and shared available data over 2016-2020. We built a unique dataset of more than 140,000 isolates. And using this dataset, we were able to explore trends and variability within and between countries. An example is provided on this figure with E. coli resistant to aminopenicillins over 2016-2020. So each graph on this figure represents a different country, and each color a different animal species. Because we could access raw data, we were able to reinterpret the raw values with a common approach and common standards. And this was done at relatively low cost because this is passive surveillance, which are being generated for diagnostic purposes. However, passive surveillance also comes with limitations, the main one being data volume and representativeness, which was highly variable between countries. And there was also a lack of harmonization between partners in terms of methods being used, which could impair comparability. Another challenge was the lack of ECOFs for certain drug-bug combination of interest to EARS-Vet that we will also need to address in the future. So recognizing those challenges, we built our work plan for JAMRAI 2. And the ambition is to make EARS-Vet a full-scale initiative. So first, we expanded the network. So a growing number of countries have expressed their interest in participating to this network. So we now have 40 partners from 18 countries, almost double compared to JAMRAI 1. We aim to facilitate routine data collection, analysis, and reporting, improve harmonization and data comparability. We also want to sequence isolates to be able to evaluate to which extent they disseminate between countries, and explore also rare or emerging resistances. And we want to integrate within the EU AMR surveillance landscape. So what have we done in year one to progress towards those objectives? The first thing we did was to meet physically in Paris soon after the kickoff, because this is a network, so we need people to know each other and to build trust, I think, between us, so we can have a good collaboration. And then we worked towards routine and data collection, analysis and reporting. First, we updated the EARS-Vet scope. So now that we have more partners participating, we were able to expand to horses, sheep, and goats data. We developed an EARS-Vet database and developed a Monnet module to facilitate the gathering of data with different formats. All partners have signed the data sharing agreement last month, so we were able to launch the first call for data in February 2025. We are drafting an EARS-Vet manual to improve harmonization, and we are also defining customized EARS-Vet MIC plates that will be used in the subsequent year to perform inter-laboratory proficiency testing. We have not started sequencing yet, but we have already selected those isolates and resistant profiles that we would like to sequence in year two. And we have started establishing collaboration with EFSA, FAO INFAM program, which is an international program for AMR monitoring in food-producing animals, as well as the Animal Health and Welfare Partnership, SOR8, which is focusing on genomic surveillance of AMR in animals. So what are our next steps? These are the milestones for year two. So as mentioned, we launched our first call for data last month. In May, we're going to have our second physical meeting in Denmark, Copenhagen, where we will also finalize our EARS-Vet customized plates. In June this year, we will release our EARS-Vet manual on the JAMRAI website. And in September, we will finalize our data collection round. So we will be able to start data analysis and interpretation. We are already thinking about year 3 and beyond to disseminate our results via report, an interactive dashboard, publication and policy brief, and we want to prepare also integration within European surveillance and sustainability. So this is my very last slide. Just to sum up how EARS-Vet is contributing to those council recommendations. Obviously, we'll cover a gap, which is surveillance of AMR in diseased animal, which we think is an important piece of the puzzle if you want to have a comprehensive surveillance system. Second, we think EARS-Vet can provide data to support EFSA evaluating whether resistant bacteria of animal pathogen should be considered for inclusion in the animal health law and regulatory surveillance. And looking at the monitoring framework, we think surveillance in diseased animals should be considered as part of this evaluation of the extent to which surveillance of AMR in animals is being implemented in each member state. So I will stop here and then give the word to Heike, who will present about surveillance in the environment.
Yeah, many thanks. And I think it very much speaks to the One Healthness of JAMRAI that a presentation on the environment, on environmental surveillance, happens right within the first section of these very important 2 days. Oops. This is quicker than I thought. So there we go again. I'm situated at the National Institute for Public Health and the Environment in the Netherlands. And to set the stage for why we conduct or think about environmental surveillance, to start with the context, well, there is scientific consensus on several facts. First of all, that AMR is also found in the environment, in waters and soils, in different forms, resistance genes, resistant bacteria, and also resistant pathogens. Also, we know some of the anthropogenic pressures that affect the dynamics of AMR and the environment. For example, release of wastewater to receiving surface waters, or application of manure of farmed animals for fertilization of soils. And we also know that the environment can be a source, an origin for resistance determinants, but it can also represent a transmission route. So humans can also be exposed to the environment, for example, when recreating in surface water, and that can represent a transmission route that also leads to to colonization of humans. So what role can environmental surveillance then play to help or to get more information about these facts? So we think that surveillance in the environment can contribute to better understanding the spread of AMR from animals and humans to the environment and also back to humans, and therefore can help estimating the human and animal health risks that are related with possible exposures. Unfortunately, the environment is still relatively new compared to the human and animal sector, so what we are faced with is a lack of harmonized approaches of how to conduct environmental surveillance. There are very few internationally harmonized examples, but still there's a call for integrated surveillance that also includes the environment, as we saw in the Council recommendations and also by UNGA. So there we go with our overall goal for JAMRAI. Our goal is to define a common surveillance strategy that addresses the contribution of the environment to AMR within the One Health framework. First of all, this surveillance strategy would move from science to action, as we have seen that many initiatives have been taken place in the research sphere but have not yet been translated to governmental actions. So by jointly defining objectives, sampling strategies, and indicators for surveillance, we hope to bring that further to a coordinated approach. And that approach could then help countries when establishing their national action plans and considering environmental surveillance, because that's often an area where countries are struggling how to implement that. The second ambition is to also form a network, EARS-Env, an environmental surveillance network. And why is that needed? As countries are really defining their strategies and trying to find ways how to include the environment. So what we want to establish is a community of practice that helps countries interacting and learning from each other's experience. That can also help integration with other sectors and networks where needed and where possible, because actually the environment is not an endpoint in itself. We always serve human and animal health in the end, so there needs to be a very close interaction with other sectors as well. How do we do that? We are currently receiving results of 2 questionnaires, quite extended questionnaires on what initiatives exist in Europe and also how future environmental surveillance could be shaped. Based on these questionnaires, we will use that within our group to form our own vision from scratch, to develop strategies and objectives. We will then consult other stakeholders to align with their requirements and ideas, and also to contribute to European regulations that currently are underway. We'll pilot those in a 1-year surveillance campaign where we use central elements and see how these can be implemented across countries. And then with separate activity, we also address antimicrobial usage, especially for antifungals, to know what kind of data we need on usage that is needed to answer questions about occurrence and development of resistance in the environment. Well, here we have actually a unique chance of devising a new surveillance system from scratch. So we can also ask fundamental questions. And these fundamental questions are, what are the actual purposes, the objectives we want to answer with environmental surveillance? And these can be manifold. Of course, detecting trends in the environment is one of them, but also wastewater-based surveillance is actually employed in many countries already. This is maybe not so much an environmental surveillance because it serves the goal to act as a complementary approach for human surveillance, because it raises information about circulation of AMR in humans. But one might also think about using environmental surveillance to interrogate emergence of new forms of AMR, or to address efficiency of interventions such as advanced wastewater treatment, which is going to be implemented across Europe. Last but not least, and importantly, surveillance does not replace risk assessment, but can generate data that helps risks or exposure assessments when conducted on environments where human exposure actually happens, such as bathing waters. And importantly, the choice of these objectives is crucial because it determines what kind of sampling strategies should be taken, what kind of samples we have to collect, and also what kind of indicators we have to use, because sometimes these indicators have to have a very high public health relevance. If we think about wastewater surveillance, sometimes they have to be measurable in order to inform, for example, exposure assessments. And there has to be a very tight collaboration between the objectives and the choice of these indicators to have a optimally suited surveillance system. We do collaborate with other initiatives to this end. As said, we need input from the human and animal health sector. First of all, to see what kind of information needs they might have towards environmental surveillance, but also to have a structured discussion on what kind of indicators are of greatest value for them, for example, for wastewater-based surveillance. We also coordinate with activities at a very different level. For example, we integrate existing experience from the upcoming quadripartite guidance on integrated surveillance that will be helpful, but also from IONET initiative in which surveillance of AMR and surface water was piloted by EEA. So that is experience we can take on board. Furthermore, there's another joint action we very closely collaborate with, which is the joint action WISH, which is devoted to wastewater surveillance entirely on very different pathogens, among them AMR. And actually, we are now collaborating so far that we've joined meetings in which we think about choice of indicators and objectives of surveillance. So that's working very nicely. And the ultimate goal is, of course, to provide input that serves the implementation of regulation. And one of those important ones at the moment is the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, because that directly requires member states to conduct wastewater surveillance. The next steps are now, with the result of the questionnaire, to come to a common approach, which is due this summer. And we use the rest of summer until autumn to then provide a detailed cookbook on how to conduct a pilot, which elements we want to pilot and with which methods. And we are starting to pilot joint environmental surveillance in autumn for about 1 year. And that gives us enough time to spend time on the evaluation of the outcome, evaluate different aspects of that surveillance system, and then use that to come forward with a joint environmental AMR surveillance approach. And again, the last slide, how does that serve countries in implementing council recommendations? Well, the goal here is clearly to develop a system for surveillance of the environment, and probably including wastewater. And the other one that is directly served is, as we already heard, the UNGA political declaration, which also asks for identifying appropriate methods for environmental surveillance to be integrated into national action plans. So I'm very much looking forward to the next year when we hopefully can inform you on the exact nature of what we're having in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Heike. So we'll now welcome our panelists for the first panel of this session. Could you please display the slide? Thank you. So we'll welcome our first panelist, Ernesto Liebana, who is a team leader at the Biological Hazard Panel at the European Food Safety Authority. We have also Caroline Whalley, who is an environmental specialist at the European Environment Agency. And we also have a panelist who is online. Hope he can hear us. Peter Hoejskov, who is working at the Food Safety and Zoonotic Diseases Department of WHO Europe. So thanks for being here with us to discuss our progress about One Health surveillance of AMR in the EU. My first question will go to Ernesto Liebana. So Ernesto, my first question is, what are your expectations about veterinary and environmental surveillance? What content would you like to see to make this surveillance useful from your perspective?
Okay, good morning, everybody. Okay, good morning, everybody, and thank you. It's a pleasure to be here in my home country, and it's a pleasure to be here representing EFSA also for this important event. I'm aware we have very little time, so I was thinking about how to address this question. A lot of the things you said resonate very much with our vision in EFSA as risk assessors. But if I have to summarize the expectations we have, it's really to aim for a comprehensive data collection. And for me, in veterinary surveillance, this means to have data from a wide range of bacteria. So, as you said, we cover already zoonotic and indicator microorganisms, but there is a clear gap on vet pathogens. And I think that's something that would bring an element that is missing for our risk assessments and then actions from risk manager point of view. I think it should increase also perhaps the range of bacterial species we survey for. Harmonized methodology is very important. I think what you said, many countries are doing this type of surveillance in Europe, but unfortunately they use different methods, and it's difficult to put everything together and to compare across. Timely and real-time really reporting so that we can know whether there are emerging issues, what the trends, identify early the trends of resistance in some of these things. And basically then integrating everything. You put on the screen the IACRA reports. I think is really a tremendous effort that over the years we have put to put all these data streams together and to give convincing evidence to the risk managers on the relations between use and resistance. So not to forget that these two things may go there hand to hand. So I think that would be very quickly my expectations. And I think it's important also, what I would like to see to make this really useful is also modern database tools, so meaning dashboards, maps, things that would allow real-time access to the data and not having to wait for reports necessarily every year. Because I think that gives a lot of power to be able to address questions at any given time. And I leave the environmental part for Caroline. Perhaps I would say something on the food environment later, but I think it's better that she addresses that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thanks a lot. Maybe I will ask you a first question, Ernesto, and right after that we'll give the mic to Caroline to complement. So my second question for Ernesto was, where do you see the added value of the EARS-Vet and EARS-Env network compared to existing surveillance in Europe? And where do they fit within the EU surveillance landscape, in your opinion?
Yeah, I guess I will repeat myself again. The added value of EARS-Vet in this case is to fill the gap that we have on a part of the veterinary surveillance. When I hear about animal health, this is not only animal health. I think you illustrated it very well with the carbapenemase resistance. This is about food safety, is about exposure through the animal environment. So it's not only related to what makes animals sick, but we need the data also on those pathogens. And just by chance, this afternoon we will be adopting the opinion on carbapenemase producing Enterobacteriaceae in the food chain. So I think that document will bring a lot of new data and some insights and reflections about this problem. And I think what you said about the support for antimicrobial stewardship is critical. I think the most data we can generate to inform veterinarians on how to prescribe and use antibiotics, the better it is for everybody, because that's one of the key tools to decrease the usage of antibiotics in Europe, and there is an urgent need to have that. So I think EARS-Vet will be really important for that. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks a lot for your input. And then Heike will continue.
Yeah. Caroline, again, welcome here and to raise an environmental voice. So the same question also to you. From your experience with surface water surveillance, what would be your expectations towards environmental surveillance? What kind of data would you profit from?
Hello everybody, I'm Caroline Whalley from the European Environment Agency. So when I talk about the EEA, I'm talking about that agency and not the economic area. Heike just gave us a little introduction about what's known about AMR in the environment area. It's very low at the moment. The capacity and capability among environmental scientists is rather low. We're really starting now. So the knowledge base that you've been building up over the last 20, 30 years, that's kind of been starting in the last 5 to 10 years in the environment area. And so when we're talking about environment, please, one of the things I want you to do is to be realistic and be patient. So Javier, in his talk, he said patience and perseverance. All right? When you talk, please engage with environment colleagues. There's a lot of expertise in water monitoring. And if you think about drinking water and bathing water, there's a lot of effort goes in there to protect public health. All right? So there's willingness and an understanding about public health in some of our colleagues, but in terms of microbiological monitoring and AMR, it's not so strong. But we need that engagement and your help to them to develop that understanding. So that's the first thing. Please engage and help people understand, just as my colleagues around the room have helped me over the last few years. We've just been running with our Ariane, which is a network of 38 countries. We had a voluntary pilot survey, which we ran with 10 countries over the last year. We met in June 2023 for the first time. We had to develop a whole process. So the analysis, what to analyse, where to analyse, the analysis, the methodology, the reporting. We had to develop all that and do something and trying to get a pilot study to be able to understand what to do. So almost a precursor to what's expected under the EARS-Env approach. We learnt a lot, all right. From my perspective as a European level, I need harmonised data. I need you to be confident that the data are comparable. I need to have a set of data that are consistent. So if one lab reports that as a substance or a target, but another lab reporting the same thing is reporting the same target. So then we understand what's needed at European level, if there's an issue at European level or if it's a country level. There's a lot of parallels to be understood in terms of the environmental sphere, for example, water monitoring. And I think we can really help each other in understanding that. I'm not sure how much time I've got left, but Heike mentioned that the monitoring purpose, be really clear about that. We can see already in the water area that with the monitoring that's going to be required under the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive that's just been newly revised and come into force in January, that there's different interests. So if you're thinking about environmental surveillance, you're going to be you want to find something. There's no point having a massive program and not having anything there. But if you're thinking about health surveillance, you need to know if something's there, some target. That's a different purpose. And the purpose drives what monitoring you're going to be doing. So be really clear when you're setting up your program of monitoring, what the purpose of that monitoring is, because that drives everything else. It drives where and what you're going to monitor. And I think, my overriding message is please engage with environment colleagues. They've got a lot of knowledge to share, and I look forward to further discussions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe that also helps for the second question, because the second question is, in how far can networks like EARS-Env help to bring that communication rolling? Is there any tip from your side, or what the role of such networks could be?
Yes, from my personal experience, I'm an environmental chemist. Okay, and most of the people you'll be dealing with are going to be from a chemistry or biological monitoring background, not microbiology. And it took me quite a while to understand that, because in chemistry you've got mass balance. Okay, if it goes in one end, you've got to find it at the other side. X equals X somehow. And microbiology doesn't work like that. And we're talking at that level. Okay, we are talking at that level. If you're dealing with chemists or, these things, but microbiology really changes, as you all know. And that's really at that level, try and understand, get people to understand that this stuff isn't as stable as what they might have been used to. So that I would really start there.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. It's time to move to Peter. Welcome here. I don't know where to address you. I hope you can see me. So Peter, you're also engaged in One Health activities. What is your opinion on what kind of information you would seek from both veterinary and environmental surveillance, and what kind of data would bring us further for these domains?
Yeah, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Sorry, I'm not able to be there with you in person. That would have been very nice, but happy that we made it work with the online connection. So yeah, thanks for the question. I think maybe first of all I should stress that I think it's a very important session we are having, and the veterinary and environmental surveillance of AMR is absolutely essential for understanding and also for mitigating the spread of resistant pathogens in the human-animal environment interface. So now, if you ask specifically more on the veterinary surveillance side, I think it's important to highlight that systematic monitoring of antimicrobial use and resistance trend in food producing and also companion animal is very important, and that should include some regular sampling of key bacteria that we know exist in that interface, Salmonella, E. coli, Campylobacter, for animals, for food products, and also for farm environments. So I think surveillance should cover the prescription of consumption patterns of antimicrobials to guide the responsible use and policy decision. In terms of the environmental surveillance, I agree with previous speakers and also Heike as the presenter that this is very new, and I think the focus should be on detecting AMR in both water, in soil, in waste streams, in high-risk areas, so that could be near farms, hospitals, wastewater treatment plants. Surveillance should track resistance genes and also bacterial strains using advanced methods like whole genome sequencing that can help identify the environmental hotspots and the pathways of resistance spread. So I think overall for AMR surveillance, it would be useful, for it to be useful, I think it must be harmonized across the sectors to allow for this cross-country comparisons. As also previous speakers have highlighted, the issue of real-time data sharing is important for timely intervention. We should also focus on linking AMR data with antimicrobial usage patterns to inform our risk assessments, and then engaging policymakers and stakeholders through some clear risk communication.
Yeah.
So that's probably the areas where I think these two areas of surveillance should be focusing.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Many thanks. Quite a to-do list for the environment, I hear. Thank you. Is there time for questions?
I don't think we really have time for questions at this moment, so I apologize for that. What we can do is later on, if people have questions, you put them onto Menti. Please do that. If you've got questions, there is the Menti code in your dossier. And so just file it in, put it in, and we will get back to you, okay? Or the team will get back to you. All right, can we move on to the next part of our presentation? And we invite Sophia and Moira onto the stage. Yes, you're going to the same, it's different people the next lot.
No, yes,
no, you can
please,
just stay, you can just stay. Yeah.
Please just stay. For the next panel, hello everyone. So let's just move straight into the next part about improving human and One Health surveillance, led by myself, Sophia, and my colleague Moira. So starting with the human health. So we work to strengthen the national surveillance systems on AMR in the human sector. And I have divided this talk into a now and, or our work into a now and a later part. And the focus of today is going to be the now part. And that is that we're performing an inventory on national AMR surveillance in JAMRAI countries. And the information we collect in this inventory is about the systems and the content of the systems. So it's not the surveillance data itself. So we're not here duplicating any of our international surveillance initiatives such as EARS-Net or GLASS. Later on, we will use all this information and build roadmaps for surveillance and also work on capacity strengthening projects, but more on that another time. So why are we making this inventory? Well, basically right now we're missing a joint compilation of national surveillance systems and with information such as which AMR pathogens are under surveillance, how is that surveillance structured, and what is the data used for? And having this information in one place will really make it easier to collaborate. We will know how we are similar and where we differ. And there is a lot of data and information on this around, but it's very scattered, and it's not really in a way that allows for us to do joint publication and visualization, which is really what we want to do. So that's why we're making the inventory. What's then part of the inventory? Well, it's focused on microbiological surveillance of AMR, and you can see here to the sides the bacterial pathogens that's included in the inventory. I'm not going to read them out, and you can also see the culture materials that we've included. And what these pathogens have in common is that they all can cause healthcare-associated outbreaks. And we collect the information in a questionnaire, and the questionnaire we developed together with our partners, and we also had reference rounds with important key stakeholders like ECDC, WHO Europe, to get their input. And roughly we can divide the questionnaire information in 3 parts, where the first one is information on national recommendations in place affecting AMR surveillance. The second part is whole genome sequencing and how that is used for AMR surveillance. And also the third part, which is also the largest part, is on how the national surveillance is structured. And several of the questions also include a legal perspective, which is something we're also working on. The status for this work, so we sent the questionnaire out to the entire JAMRAI consortium, so not only the countries that are in our work, so 30 countries. So far we have answers from 23 of them. So thank you so much everyone that has filled both work to write and design this questionnaire, commenting on it, and also filling it out, because it's quite a large questionnaire. So we're very happy, and this puts us in a really good place for what comes next and what we're doing now. Which is that we're right now working on visualizing this data in a joint dashboard. And this is not something being done, as I said, right now, so we don't have anything to show from this. So I will just give you some examples from what you will be able to see in this dashboard. So you will be able to see which AMR pathogens that are notifiable according to national legislations in the countries. So it means that what is under mandatory surveillance, but you will also be able to see what's under voluntary surveillance. You will be able to also see current national surveillance of AMR pathogens isolated from different culture materials, for instance, urine samples. And this is interesting since we're talking about expanding surveillance to know what is there and what is being done in different countries. You will also be able to see which partner countries that have different national recommendations in place, for instance, treatment guidance to the most common infections. So the target groups for this dashboard is really ourselves, the partners that are working on the dashboard. We should be able to go here and sort of get inspiration. What are we doing in our country? What is everyone else doing? And get inspiration. And another important target group is EU and UN agencies that are working on our international surveillance systems. And they should be able to go here and get a better understanding of what's going on in different countries and how does that relate to their work. Also, policy advisors is an important group that wants to sort of see how can we move things forward, what do we need to turn into policy in order to sort of get action in our own country. Some quick technical information. We are developing this using R-Shiny, which is an open source software, very popular among dashboarders. And we put together a working group with members from 8 different partner countries that are working on this together. The code will be open to the public via GitHub, so you can follow it there. And the first version will be online in June 2025, so stay tuned for that. I also want to mention quickly one of our great sources of inspiration, which is the TRACS dashboard. And many of you might have seen this. This is a dashboard led by the UN agencies. And this is a really, really great design of a dashboard and something we're looking a lot of for inspiration. So thanks a lot, TRACS, for building this dashboard. So then you might ask, why are you putting all this work into making a dashboard? Well, they have a way of making complex data understandable and easy to access. And we really, really need this for AMR because, as you all know, it very quickly becomes very complicated. It's a lot of pathogens, it's a lot of culture materials, and we just need to make it understandable somehow. It also increases the availability of key information that we know that many actors are interested in. And this is important for collective memory, but also for accountability. So this is information that we need to access over and over again. It's not something we can look at once and then understand. So it's important that it's easy to access. It also provides a baseline, which we think is really important because we need this baseline in order to follow up. So if we want to develop, we need to know how are we developing and where are we going. And this is important also for sustainability. So talking about sustainability, what is then the long-term plan for this? So as we see JAMRAI, it's a development project. So we have these years to sort of make it as good as possible and to design the concept and the content. So we plan to complete 2 development cycles. So we are right now in the first cycle where we collect the data, we do the dashboard, we analyze, then we evaluate and make improvements and collect the data once more. Because it's really hard to get this right the first time around. So we really need to circle it one time to get it good. We are looking at different options for sustainability and long-term hosting and things like that, but right now we are just really focused at making it as good as possible, so it's worth sustaining for the future. So I want also just to put our work in a little bit of a larger context and talk about how we work to implement important policy documents with a focus on then, of course, the Council recommendation and the adjoining monitoring and evaluation study. So a lot of the indicators and recommendations in here are also part of the dashboard. So, and this is, for instance, the guidelines for treatment of common infections, but also the notifiable pathogens under national legislations and so on. So what we're building here is really a tool that can be used for many purposes, but among other things to follow up some of the really important indicators that are in the Council recommendation. And we think that JAMRAI is in a really good position to do that because we sit sort of right between action and implementation. And we hope that by building this place, we can sort of make sure that we are building the lines and implementing the right things. So, yeah, thanks. Over to you.
Thanks, Sophia. So you've just heard about how in EU-JAMRAI we're working to improve surveillance of AMR in the human, veterinary and environmental sector. And this next action is about how we're supporting countries in bringing together data from these 3 sectors to develop national integrated One Health surveillance of AMR. And so you might ask, if we have effective surveillance in each of the sectors, why do we need an integrated One Health surveillance? Well, the truth is that surveillance data is really fragmented. In most countries, you have lots of different actors who are all managing their own surveillance programs that have very distinct goals. And often each of these programs will produce a report each year. So on the left-hand side here, you can see just a selection of the reports that are produced each year in Belgium containing data about antimicrobial resistance and consumption. And each of these reports can be more than 30 pages long, so it can be a bit challenging to not only find the relevant data, but to get a clear overview of what's happening. So by bringing this most important data together into one space, you can get this clear overview, and you can make sort of a one-stop shop for stakeholders like policymakers who are really looking for the big picture of what's happening in terms of AMR in their country. But it has another important additional value, which is that obviously to produce these reports, you're not just bringing together the data, but you're also bringing together the people who make this data. And so you're forcing the collaboration of all of these different people. On the right-hand side here, you can see the members who contribute to our BelMap One Health report in Belgium. And all of these people have different expertise and competencies. But by bringing all of these expertise together with having this clear overview of the data, you can agree together on unified recommendations and priorities. And that's really important because it supports, very effective not only communication about antimicrobial resistance, but also supports the development of antimicrobial resistance policy. But of course, it's not easy to build a network like this, so how are we hoping to support countries in doing this? Well, the first step is to know who's doing what and what data and programs are already active within each country. And that's what we've been doing in year one. So together with our participants, we developed a questionnaire where people, one coordinator in each country, could collect data on what programs are active and who's running them in their country, and also to collect some key information in terms of developing these One Health reports. So is the data open access? What sort of data is reported? Are they mandatory or voluntary? And I know you've already heard a lot about sort of inventories within AMR, so what's the added value of having one with a One Health perspective? Well, this mapping exercise has a much broader scope. So we're not just talking about a handful of the most critical bacteria antibiotics, we're really talking about all antimicrobials, all pathogens, and not just antimicrobial resistance data, but also consumption data across all sectors. And in forcing this sort of collection of data across the sectors, that's the first step in building this One Health network. We not only provided sort of a structure for the questionnaire, but we also provided a structure for the results. So on the right-hand side here, you can see this matrix that each country has produced about what programs are active, in what settings, and what sectors in terms of collecting data on antimicrobial resistance and consumption. But I'm not going to present any sort of overriding results combining all of the countries, because actually the point here is not to make a European-level network or a European-level data set. We're really about supporting each country in developing this network and report within their own system. And so whilst we provided a framework, each country was able to adapt this according to their national situation. But while we're working on a national level, we of course still want to learn from each other as part of this JAMRAI experience. So in February, we hosted a workshop in Brussels where we brought together all of these coordinators. And the first day was all about discussing the results of this mapping exercise. They were able to discuss the strengths and weaknesses of their surveillance landscape within that country. And it really gave us a clear overview of what One Health surveillance of AMR in Europe looks like at the moment. But of course, we don't want to just know what's happening now, we want to improve upon it. And day two was really about what do we want One Health surveillance to look like in the future. So we had presentations from organizations with established One Health reports. We had a panel discussion with policymakers to find out what sort of reporting is most useful and accessible for them. And we started having a discussion about selecting a small group of key indicators that each country hopefully will be able to eventually report on, that gives this clear overview of the most important patterns in terms of AMR and AMC. So that's where we are now. Where are we hoping to go in the next couple of years? Well, this year is really all about building the One Health capacity within these countries. One of the tools we're using to do that is the One Health EpiCap tool, which I'll explain briefly in the next slide. And then years 3 and 4, we're really looking to develop within each country their One Health reports, so helping them to produce a One Health report for AMR and AMC. But of course, we want this report to be of added value. We don't just want to bring all of these individual reports together into one monster PDF. So we're looking at developing tools like interactive dashboards to see what degree of integrated analysis is possible. And like I said, to develop these handful of common indicators to try and make it, an accessible, useful, added value report. So this year, each of the panelists are going to be working at building their One Health network and the One Health capacity within their surveillance landscape, and that's really tough. So one of the tools that we're using is an application called the One Health EpiCap tool, and this is where the coordinator within each country is going to put together a panel of 8 to 12 panelists from across the sectors and hopefully across the range of stakeholders. And basically the tool supports discussion to allow all of these different panelists to come to a consensus in evaluating how effective in terms of One Health approach their surveillance system is in terms of organization, operation, and impact. And you put this consensus agreement together into the application, and it outputs a series of diagnostics about your surveillance system. And you can see an example of here on the right. And together with these diagnostics of what your strengths and weaknesses are, and all of the discussion that allowed you to come to this consensus, you have an output of sort of concrete and actionable activities that you can do to build the One Health capacity and build collaboration, so hopefully strengthen the One Healthness of your surveillance system. And as my colleagues have said, these actions weren't developed in isolation. We're hoping to support countries in implementing European documentation. So within the Council recommendations, of course, to be able to close existing gaps, you have to know where they are. So hopefully with this mapping exercise and also bringing together the experts within a country, we'll be able to identify, or each country will be able to better identify where there are gaps in their data and work together to work out how to close them. And in supporting countries in producing a One Health AMR report and a One Health AMR surveillance system, we're directly helping them to achieve this output indicator and the recommendation for having an integrated surveillance of AMR and AMC across the different sectors within their country. So I can hand back over to you.
Yes. So now we've given you so much information in both our sessions, so we just want to try to summarize this a little bit for you and show a little bit how the key actions of our work relate to these surveillance gaps that you might remember we talked about way back in the start. But if we're looking at clinical infections in animals, we have EARS-Vet working on that. We're looking at environmental surveillance, then it's EARS-Env that is really on a good way to making this into an international network. We then have expanding surveillance in humans. This is definitely part of what we're doing, and in the dashboard we're building, you will be able to see information on how this looks in current state and what we can do from that. Also, what we just heard, the national analysis of AMR from a One Health perspective, we have this support work to see how we can support the building of a national One Health report in each country. Yes, so with that, we would like to go to our next panel discussion. So the second panel discussion will be focusing on how we direct the EU-JAMRAI 2 surveillance work to add value to the current surveillance landscape. And we already have Ernesto and Caroline here on stage, and Peter somewhere online, hopefully. But I also want to mention, can you please go back? Yes, I also want to mention, to welcome a few more panelists, starting with Dominique from ECDC, Ariane from the European Commission, and Velina, also from the European Commission. Please join us here. And these questions that we have, written to the panel, it's questions really that we are thinking a lot about and trying to address in our work. So we're very, very happy that you are all here today to help us with this, because it will be really, really useful for us in our future work. So we will start a bit with the human aspects and sort of discussing what aspects within human microbiological surveillance of AMR do you think is the most important to move forward? Starting with you, Dominique.
Thank you very much for the invitation. A lot of data, yes, I agree. But we're missing 3 countries. So your dashboard will miss 3 countries. Is it time to catch up with those, the train has started, but it's still okay to be on board the train, and so then you complete your dashboard? That would be my first, my small frustration and my small recommendation. As mentioned in the Council recommendation, we need to expand. We need to expand to more clinical samples. We need to expand to more pathogen species. And I think you will give us some information here. So that's a priority for everybody, and you will contribute to this. And then this will only be possible through electronic surveillance. I mean, remember the beginning of EARS-Net, people were taking the data from their lab system, or will collect the data on bloodstream infections on paper forms, and then we'll enter the paper forms in Monnet, and we'll produce a file, and that file could be sent to EARS and then to EARS-Net. Now we need to do this with electronic surveillance. So at ECDC, we started working on both issues. When we're reflecting, the EARS-Net Disease Network Coordinating Committee is reflecting on how we can have data on more types of clinical samples, There are plenty of pitfalls, and we're reflecting about it. And then we're also working on expanding to electronic surveillance. And then maybe my last point, or maybe two points. The first one is expanding to genomic surveillance. We need to do this. We started working with this at ECDC, but the challenge is really about linking the results. And we're not there. It's done for foodborne pathogens, it's done for Salmonella, for Campylobacter. It's not done yet for the pathogens under EARS-Net and EU-JAMRAI. So I think it's a challenge, a different objective, different sampling frames, and we need to do this. And finally, I think we have not solved one major important problem. We're still mentioning AMR, MDROs, carbapenem-resistant organisms, CROs, carbapenem-resistant Enterobacterialis, CRA, carbapenemase-producing Enterobacterialis, CPE. And then we put this for each species, carbapenem-resistant Klebsiella pneumoniae, carbapenem-resistant... Well, this is confusing the decision makers. I mean, we just had this example right now with the rapid risk assessment of ECDC, as we decided to say on CRAs, and now there will be discussion with the Health Security Committee on Friday, and I suppose we will still talk about CRAs, but the only data that we have there for carbapenem-resistant Klebsiella pneumoniae. Believe me, the decision makers don't know what they have to fight. And this is a question for all of us. If someone has a solution, please let us know. But we'll need to solve this at one point. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So going also to you, Velina, from your perspective, so what do you think is the most important for us to move forward with?
Okay. Well, a lot was already said by Dominique. As you're, I guess all of you are aware, legally speaking, under the legislation that we have at EU level, it's ECDC that has the formal role of overseeing surveillance of AMR in human health. But what I can say from our perspective, and it builds on what was in the Council recommendation that you, of course, are mentioning, and from what you presented today, I think it's great to see that at national level, the developments that were in the Council, that we proposed in the Council recommendation, the Council agreed, are sort of helped also through JAMRAI. This is excellent. And what I can complement what we are doing at EU level, as I mentioned, we revised the regulation on serious cross-border health threats that govern surveillance of 50-odd communicable diseases at EU level, and we are actually in the process of revising that exact legal act, which is about what diseases are notifiable at EU level. And we're also strengthening through that. It's not adopted yet, so what I'm going to say here is what we as the Commission have proposed. Obviously, all the member states are yet to agree, but we would like to strengthen surveillance of AMR also through that legal act as well. We have streamlined the reporting a bit more. We have added consumption. That's a target, as I showed, of course, and as you all know, which was being reported to ECDC on a voluntary basis. We would like to bring it under the legal base that we have. We have added a new pathogen, that's Candida auris. I think resistance in fungals was also mentioned as a growing threat. And we have also tried to provide in the legal basis what Dominique mentioned, expanding the type of isolates, which you also mentioned very, very well, going in the same direction, beyond just cerebrospinal fluids and blood infections. And because with just those, we are essentially seeing the tip of the iceberg, and we would like to know more about where the threat lies. And I think I would agree with Dominique in what he just said, the very last point about how we communicate about all the wealth of information, and that also you will be collecting. I think I salute your efforts to try to put it in a dashboard to make it more easily understandable, because that is also a challenge. And hopefully now in the Health Security Committee on Friday, when decisions are taken about what do we do about it, okay, here we have detected it. There is the detecting, and the detection also has to be rapid. And that brings me something else that I said also in my speech, that we hope the new EORL, European Union Reference Laboratory on AMR, will also be, helping member states with expanding the capacities to rapidly detect. But then the question is, what do we do about it? And that answer is not always straightforward. And so the policymakers need to really understand where the issue lies. Where is it detected? Now, let's say Klebsiella mainly in hospitals, but if we talk about carbapenem-resistant E. coli, that changes the picture, and we need to think where is the intervention needed to be made. So yes, plenty of work also ahead of us too. I'll stop here, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And just to mention those countries that you mentioned, Dominique, that has not answered our questionnaire, it's still open and we will be in touch. Thank you.
So we've sort of heard what the additional value of these different surveillances in the separate sectors, and I think now one of the questions that certainly within our task we've been asking is what's the added value of One Health surveillance of AMR, and what parts of a One Health surveillance report can be most useful. And so Ariane, if it's okay, I'd like to start from your perspective in terms of the AMR and Human Nutrition Unit of the European Commission. Where do you see the added value?
Thank you for the question. So I will start with the obvious because it was said already many times and it will be kind of a summary now, but obviously integrated surveillance, and from the Commission side we believe, will bring a major benefit because we have heard that early detection means faster responses, helping to control AMR before it spreads. A One Health approach gives us a full picture of how AMR moves between humans, animals, food and the environment. It encourages responsible use of antimicrobials in all sectors. Stronger evidence-based policies help to address AMR more effectively. It improves public health, food safety, food security. It protects the environment. It saves costs. It drives innovation. But having said that, we know that not all member states first may wish to set up integrated surveillance systems, or if they wish, they can not so easily. So, and this is understandable because these systems comes with many challenges. They are costly to establish and they require substantial resources to maintain, including dedicated multi-sectoral AMR teams. So, this is why at least at the Commission we have started also some kind of help for the member states by conducting a feasibility study on integrated surveillance. So it's a bit a step back of what JAMRAI is doing in a more long term, which is already also the implementation. So the study was launched in October 2024 and will end up already in August 2025. So it's a very short, focused study that we hope will contribute as much as possible to the work undergone in JAMRAI 2. So the study will focus on assessing the feasibility, how is it feasible to integrate a One Health surveillance systems, the requirements that needs to be implemented, and the experiences of member states that have already developed integrated surveillance. So the expected outcome really is to identify the necessary elements for designing these systems and implementing those, the key success factors based on experience and solutions to overcome the challenges of this system.
Thank you. And thank you also for giving that overview of the feasibility study, because I know some of you have probably been contacted as part of that, so it's nice to see how these are working together, and it's been great to communicate with your team and see how we can collaborate in both of these actions helping towards each other. And so it's nice to have this overview from a One Health perspective, but I think also, hopefully, One Health surveillance can provide additional value within each of the sectors. And so, Caroline, if it's okay, I'd like to hear from your perspective, from the environmental agency perspective, what potential additional value do you see, or what parts of a One Health report do you think, from your perspective, could be most useful?
Hello? Okay. Well, we're starting from a baseline of about 0 for data, so integration and all the rest of it is a good time to be starting because we don't have anything on AMR. But actually, listening to Dom and listening to the other talks and your plans under this programme of work, actually the European Environment Agency, our job, we're not a regulator, our job is to make information available to the public and to policymakers. And we get a lot of reporting of environment data from countries, nationally reported data, and we make it available. So I do understand the sort of issues you're facing, and it's really important that you get comparable data that are quality checked. So that's the data input side, and that means that when you make your dashboards, you've got comparable data. And one of the things there, I was thinking about this in relation to where chemicals analysis was in the 1980s, because I feel that's where we are with environmental data. All right, we need a library of substances. Okay, so when one lab over there says they're reporting a particular target, that another lab is reporting, and they're saying they're doing that target, and it's the same thing. And it's a bit like Dom was saying, is if you've got lots of names for different things, it's not only confusing for policymakers, which is really important, because how do you make a decision if you've got 15 names for something that's slightly similar? You know, you haven't got a kind of unified target. So that's partly, so it's that side, you know, you need to agree what are the targets. And that's for the policymakers, but it's also for reporting, because if you've got 15 variants for reporting for 1 million things, that makes your data entry and all the rest of it really complicated. So I haven't got a solution, but in chemicals we have things like the chemical abstracts number, the CAS number, we have the ECHO number, and that's a reference. All right, and that's an analytical source. When labs are doing their analysis, they've got a standard and they can do that analysis there. So you need something like that that gives us confidence that all the different labs are doing a good job and you're all reporting the same substance. You also need certified reference materials so that you can be confident that in the chemicals term, the concentrations are the same, or reliable concentrations. Now, I understand those don't exist yet, but because of the development under the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive that needs to be monitoring by 2030 at large plants, the JRC, the Joint Research Centre, which is the European Commission's research arm, they're developing reference materials, so that will be doing that to support that. So one of the things will be to work with, I know some of you already are, but work in complement the JRC's work on AMR, because they're really ramping up. That will help accelerate progress. Yeah, and just to say that, I'm just going to one more bit area, because I think the parallels with the chemicals are quite similar, actually. So we had something called Dangerous Substances Directive, and countries report a few substances under that. And then under the Water Framework Directive, which came through in 2000, some substances were identified that were of European importance, and they're called priority substances, and all member states have to analyse those in all their surface water bodies. Okay, and there were 33 of them. That's being expanded now. But there were also below that, there were some substances that were important at national level or at regional level. Okay, so there's some that are important at European level, and we need to know about these European ones, because those are the ones that need European action to be taken. Okay, so learning from that chemicals experience, I think there's a lot of parallels that you can work with here to say, this is what is important in this country or this region, but these are the ones we actually, all of us need to be aware of and get some sort of working up from that.
No, I completely agree with that, and it's certainly something we've been discussing, that as well as having these key indicators that are maybe agreed upon on a higher level, there definitely needs to be flexibility for countries to be able to have discussions within their own network and make priorities and indicators that are most relevant for their national situation. I completely agree. And so, Ernesto, maybe from an EFSA point of view, what sort of benefits or what added value do you see from One Health reports and One Health reports on AMR and AMC?
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to state the obvious again, but AMR emerges and moves across all these compartments we have heard that are within the One Health. Back many years in time, we saw many problems coming from the use of growth promotion in animals to human health. Nowadays, we're seeing some spillover events from humans back to the animals, and we have the environment, which is the connector for all these things. So it's fairly obvious, if we don't do One Health surveillance, we're never going to be able to understand the full flow and dynamics of resistance development. So we cannot afford to do this in small pockets. I think the risk assessments we do nowadays are normally together. More and more, we have to do these farm to fork or holistic risk assessments where we need data from all sectors. I think the old days of just doing something in your small area are long gone. We talked about how expensive this may be, but I see it differently, because this is really efficient use of resources. We can learn from each other. Where a system is already in place, we can communicate to the other sectors, explain how things are done, reuse methodology, dashboards, use our collective memory to help each other. And I think that is really an outstanding thing that we can do. And it forces, anyway, to work in these multidisciplinary teams. Again, nowadays it's difficult to believe you can do something where you don't count on somebody with a human expertise or environmental expertise. If you do so, I think the outcome will be very challenged. So I think all those things are obvious benefits and added value to One Health.
Thank you. And Peter, we see you again. Just to say also to the audience here and online that the QR code on the right-hand side is where you can pose your own questions. So hopefully there will be some time at the end of the panel discussion to also answer some questions from you. If you have any burning questions, please put them into the Mentimeter. So Peter, maybe I can ask from a WHO perspective, for you, what do you see sort of the added value and what parts of a One Health report might be most useful in your opinion?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, along the lines of what other panel members have said, I think it's quite clear that a One Health approach to AMR surveillance is essential because AMR does not respect boundaries. I mean, it's spread between humans, animals, food, and also the environment, and even across national borders. So integrating surveillance across all these sectors, we can detect emerging resistance trends, we can identify transmission pathways, and implement targeted interventions before AMR becomes a larger public health crisis. So now you're asking about the added value. I think that lies really within the ability to provide a more comprehensive understanding of AMR dynamics. So instead of having just, it's not that One Health surveillance is replacing sector-specific surveillance, but it adds an additional component. So instead of having isolated human, veterinary, and environmental data, we gain a more unified picture of resistance development and its spread across the three compartments. And that enables better policy decisions, optimized antimicrobial use, and more proactive containment measures. So to reduce the public health burden of AMR, I think the most valuable components that you were asking on One Health surveillance might be the issue of integrated data analysis. So linking antimicrobial use, resistance patterns across the sectors, human, animal, and environmental health sectors, is one valuable component. I think the risk-based reporting is another one. So really identifying the high-risk areas for targeted interventions. And that could be farms with excessive antibiotic use, or it could be wastewater sites where high resistance levels are identified. A third component could be around early warning systems. So leveraging on whole genome sequencing to track resistance genes and emerging threats in real time is an important thing. And also the transparent risk communication. So ensuring that policymakers, industry, and the public can receive these clear science-based recommendations from across the three sectors. So I think strengthening all these components, One Health AMR surveillance can really drive coordinated action to protect the health both of humans, animals, and the environment, and maybe also ensuring a more sustainable use of antimicrobials. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And Dominique, maybe we can come in from a human public health perspective as well. For you and for ECDC, what components of the One Health report do you think might be most useful in reducing the public health burden of AMR?
Maybe I will start building up on what Ernesto said. It's writing a One Health AMR report. But probably in many countries will be the first time that such a report is produced, forces people to work together, and this is essential. So having this common goal of producing one concrete output is very important. And I'm talking from experience, having worked many years in Denmark with the DanMap collaboration. It's essential. People learn to know each other, start working, understand where the differences are, and start solving them to produce a report. So essential, and I hope you, as part of an EU-JAMRAI, you will have many of those reports. And then that gives a possibility to communicate, to raise awareness, because you have one output, so you can, and people will start talking about it in media. Very good. how can this reduce the burden of AMR? We have one common currency, it's called E. coli. E. coli is probably the best One Health pathogen. You know, if you're talking about Salmonella, Campylobacter, yes, they're transmitted from animals to humans via food, but they're rarely responsible for healthcare-associated infections. If you're thinking about Streptococcus pneumoniae, it's a common pathogen for community infections, but it doesn't come from animals, and it's rarely responsible for, if it is responsible for healthcare-associated infections. E. coli is transversal. It's something we most likely acquire from food-producing animals, a major pathogen for community acquired, in particular, urinary tract infections, and it is a small component of a healthcare-associated infection. So I would say, let's work on E. coli in all the sectors. We don't know much about the environment, but that may be a way for humans and animals to be contaminated. So I would say common currency, E. coli, and big focus in the One Health collaboration. Still, when we look at the burden and the estimates that we've been doing at ECDC and also with OECD, the big burdens comes from healthcare-associated infections and from pathogens that have nothing to do with One Health. Because they are in, I mean, they may be in the hospital environment, but they're being transmitted in hospitals. So let's not forget our big fire, our emergency right now about carbapenem-resistant Enterobacterialis CRS, because this is the major contributor to the burden in human health, and it's increasing from year to year. Yeah. That's what our data show, and that's what the DG Santé has been showing. So, fine to work with One Health. Let's not forget about the current emergency.
No, thank you. I think that's really interesting. Also, yesterday, as part of workshops before this, we were discussing the development of indicators in the environmental surveillance and having this idea of what the common One Health indicators can be, but again, keeping it in perspective when considering public health burden is also really important. And Velina, maybe you can come in on that point from a human health security perspective. When looking at that data, what parts of the One Health report do you think could be most valuable? But of course, taking into account that a lot of the public health burden is maybe caused by pathogen drug combinations that actually aren't really so One Health based.
No, okay. Thank you once again. Well, a lot of the things were already said, and again, I probably come from a bit more from the policymaker risk management side. As I said, it's very, very useful to see where the threat lies. Where is it detected? Where is it really originating from? So where can we, do something about it? And depending, as Dominique was saying, depending on the pathogen, that will be very different. I guess the value that I'll speak about myself for the human health part, and I will give the example of the JACRA report, which was already mentioned, and it's thanks to the collaborative effort of our EU agencies. It is very, very useful to see, for example, let's say the use of antimicrobials in animals, how that may trickle down to humans. And as you are all aware, at EU level, on the animal health side, a lot of effort was done in the recent years with the ban of the use of antimicrobials for growth promotion that was mentioned by Ernesto as well, with the fact that we designated a list of antimicrobials that are now only to be used in human use, and so on and so forth. And these efforts continue also, as I presented this morning. This is something that could be done there. And where should we act on the human health side? So this is, again, what Dominique was saying, that there are efforts that we will inevitably have to do in hospitals. And all acknowledging the importance of One Health, we have to be, of course, clear that we don't have One Health hospitals. We don't have One Health labs even. We are processing this. So the efforts on One Health are absolutely, and I think you're going in the right direction to, as was already said, to forge on national level this collaboration and to be able to look into it, because indeed I'm aware that not all member states have One Health, let's say, integrated reports and analyses. But we should acknowledge that the constituent sort of parts of the One Health have to do their job first, so that we then be able to do the proper analysis and analyze the data through a One Health perspective, which is very, very valuable as well. And if I could add one last bit on the environment, because we're also involved in the work that was mentioned by the JRC on looking at this methodology for what do we actually monitor now in wastewater surveillance. I mean, I will draw the parallel with COVID. We were looking at COVID surveillance from wastewater, and that was a very, very valuable source to identify where are we having the outbreaks and what is happening and how can we, attack it further. It was another very valuable source. So I'm looking forward to, once this reporting starts really taking place, to be another source of information on AMR. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Yeah, Ernesto.
Minute, I would like to react to something I heard from my colleagues, which I agree with, but only partially. I understand the emergency and the stress should be given for some important pathogens right now in hospital settings mainly, but this is also One Health. I think every time something gets out of hand in one little pocket, it influences all the other pockets. And I totally agree. Carbapenem resistance, Klebsiella pneumoniae is probably right now one of our top priorities and should be addressed immediately. But we are seeing permeating of not only microorganisms. We have to remember we're not only talking about pathogens here, we're talking about genetic mobile elements, flow of genes, and all of this happens very quickly in this very complex environment. All we need is that the problem gets out of hands in food production animals. You will get that multiplied by 1,000 in a couple of years. So we have to address, of course, the emergencies immediately, but we have to keep a very close eye on how the rest of the, let's say, universe may be affected by these shoots. Yeah, thank you.
No, thank you very much.
This has been an amazing session. Well done. Well done. You've not only presented an amazing panel discussion. Thank you for everybody. And you've caught up on a lot of the time. So I want to congratulate you as a team. Can we give them a hand? But it's not over, because they are going to take one or two questions so that we can still go and have coffee and get back in time. There are going to be one or two questions, and anything we don't get to now will be answered by the team afterwards. All right? Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So we have a couple of questions. One is about how to come across the problem of data sharing for One Health data collection and data protection, and also for animal pathogen surveillance. Who is going to pay for this?
In terms of the challenges of One Health data sharing, that is one of the things that we've been addressing in terms of when our coordinators have been performing this mapping exercise. We've collected data on the how the data is reported and whether it's open access or not. And of course, that really depends upon the country. So when we're looking at building national surveillance systems, for me in Belgium, it's very hard for me to address those challenges in another country. And so what we're trying to do is support each country in becoming aware of the situation, and hopefully maybe through our, the great thing about JAMRAI is we have groups working on so many different things. So maybe with the coordination teams, we can also look on putting those things into their national action plans and building to try to overcome some of those bridges by already having coordination and collaboration between different areas of expertise. In terms of who's going to pay for the human pathogen, animal pathogen, I don't know if anyone has any suggestion, certainly outside of my area of expertise.
Yeah, I think we might need to keep that question for another forum.
Sure. And then we also have a question from Ukraine. When collecting data about AMR burden in the One Health context, how crucial is it to investigate the circulation of bacteria between three sectors? So we have talked about, about measuring E. coli, it's a common indicator in the three compartments.
I think one of at the moment, for a number of sectors, we really don't have any data in a lot of countries. So I think it's, in terms of working out how crucial it is, we first of all need to identify what those possible transmission pathways would be. And I think that's part of building this network and bringing all of these expertise and all of this data together is a first step towards that. But yeah, I don't know if from an environmental point of view, in terms of looking at the transmission between the environment and the other sectors, I think it's really part of the development in terms of working out what surveillance system we're going to set up. I don't know, Heike, if you can come and contribute. I think your expertise in that is...
Yeah, thanks. I would very much echo Dominique here. He says E. coli is the one to go for if you go for One Health surveillance. And indeed, if you think about true One Health surveillance and transmission between different compartments, then E. coli is the one where actually the knowledge we have so far has been generated on transmission, on specifically ESBL producing E. coli. We might have similar activities towards CPE if they occur in animals or in humans. So I very much agree. If we want to have, that's a personal view, but that is not yet backed up by my group, so no guarantee here, but there's quite a likelihood that if we want to really sample something across all sectors, then this might very well include E. coli. And that is also echoed, for example, in the WHO tricycle protocol, where the choice was only made for ESBL, E. coli as the indicator to start with. So more to come, but this is the initial answer.
And maybe if I can just add to that, because I saw there was a question from Ukraine about the integrated surveillance, and just to build on what Heike was saying, we are actually these days supporting an initiative in Ukraine in implementing the tricycle protocol, so looking specifically at ESBL producing E. coli in the 3 compartments. So just adding that to the answer to the question. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think in terms of time, we have to move on. So as Val said, we will try to answer any other questions that have already come up. But if you wouldn't mind going on to the next slide in our presentation. We'd also really like to hear from you and from the people attending online what you see as the added value and what parts of, especially in terms of the One Health report, what parts would be most valuable for you. So we'd love your input on developing our program, and hopefully then next year we can come and present to you how we've integrated all of your feedback into what we're doing. So if you could follow the QR code, or for those who are here today, it's also the middle QR code on the little piece of paper in your dossier, and we'd love to hear your opinion. But otherwise, I think it's time for coffee. So
thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Panelists, a very valuable discussion. Thank you.